Thanks for joining us for an introduction to post-disaster FEMA regulations and substantial damage. Chief Mixon's with me. We're going to try to get through some of the big questions that we've had along the way. I'm going to let him start sharing his screen, um, and so we can get going.
All right.
As
While we're working on that, I've got a microphone here. Can everybody hear me okay? Give me a thumbs up maybe if it's good, or let me know in the chat if the volume's too low. Okay, looks like the sharing is enabled now. Okay, I got a message that says they can hear me. That's excellent. Thank you for that. Okay, so before we started, we just wanted to cover a few items that make this type of flooding very dangerous from a fire safety standpoint. As you guys know from Hurricane Helene, unfortunately, the surge we experienced from that event was a saltwater flooding event. The storm surge was saltwater. Saltwater has tendency to be very corrosive on our electrical systems. Salt water is an electrolyte type solution, many different charged ions in that solution, especially the chlorine ions, are very corrosive to copper. And of course, most of our electrical systems, our wiring, many of our connections
made of copper. There is some aluminum and other metals, but the salt.
in a freshwater flood event. And what we worry about when we have that corrosion is it can actually create electrical shorts in the system. Those short circuits can cause excessive heat, sparking, and fire hazards. We have seen throughout the county a very high uptick in structure fires post-hurricane turned on. Now, unfortunately, the corrosion can take place rapidly or
So if business will expose that salt water,
electrical systems, whether it be
panels, breakers, anything like that exposed.
we do highly recommend that those be inspected by a certified electrician. If there is corrosion noted or it was suspect or subject to saltwater contact, they can change some of those components out and make it safe
Before that significant corrosion takes place. So we do worry about the electrical systems when exposed to water, fire hazards, not only immediately, but in the future due to corrosion, especially at the. So we always recommend that a certified electrician check those components out. We also worry about the long-term corrosion of structural components, especially fasteners, even wood.
With metal fastening components, whether that be nails, screws, rivets, etc. So you worry about the long-term weakening of those components that actually hold building materials together. It can often the corrosion can occur in hidden spaces, right? Our nails, our screws, the things that hold components together aren't always visible. Part of the idea is to make those covered with drywall, spackle, whatever, so you don't see those fasteners. So you have to really be cognizant anytime building components were exposed to salt water that corrosion does start right away and can increase over time, contributing to the weakness of those fastening components. Once again, a professional building inspector or contractor can do an evaluation and assess that situation and the potential for hidden damage. We do also worry about mold and mildew development. Salt water can accelerate growth of certain type of molds. And of course, in our environment, right, even though we are in the fall season,
Still,
days and that heat and that humidity can also help contribute to that mold growth. I would recommend, as you're doing inspection, as you're doing demolition type work on your homes or businesses, it's always good to wear some type of respirator like an N95 mask, something like that.
or to loosen up any of those spores, then of course you would have that respiratory protection. Air conditioners, once again, that is an electrical component. If that is exposed to salt water, we do have the corrosion issues. The high
Is really stressed every time that AC compressor is kicked on. So you want to make sure you have those inspected too, if they were subject to salt water. And then, of course, we do worry if the salt water or any type of moisture is in the ductwork. The air conditioner wasn't working properly for some amount of time. We do worry about mold growth inside that HVAC system also. Might be a good time to have the ductwork cleaned and inspected, make sure there's no mold inside the ductwork. In a recent situation we've been dealing with in the fire service is lithium ion battery fires. What we're finding out is salt water and the corrosion from salt water is very hazardous when it comes to lithium ion batteries. Lithium ion batteries are basically, it's depending on the size of the battery, you have many smaller lithium ion batteries in series, and it makes like a battery pack. So the larger the pack, the more of these lithium ion batteries. When one does catch fire or it's weakened, there is something called thermal runaway where it tends to move very rapidly from battery to battery until it's very quickly out of control. They are very hard to extinguish and they burn at a very high heat. Hard to extinguish because the components of the battery itself is an oxidizer. It can almost create its own oxygen environment, makes it very hard to extinguish. We almost have to submerge this type of battery or let it burn for a very long time to extinguish itself. Excuse me. Lithium ion batteries also can give off toxic gas when they burn. One of those gases is hydrogen fluoride. Hydrogen fluoride, unfortunately, is a calcium seeker, so it does have very detrimental effects on the cardiovascular system. So if you were to experience a lithium ion battery fire, you definitely want to get away from it and not breathe in any of the material that's off-gassing. Call the fire department right away. Now, if you did have lithium ion batteries, whether it be something small from a cell phone, a battery pack for a handheld tool, or especially a larger battery pack like in an electric EV, electric vehicle, electric bike, electric scooter, anything like that, and it was exposed to salt water, we've got to get it outside of the structure, and then we need to dispose of it properly because that corrosion can weaken that membrane in the battery pack. And once that fire starts, like I say, very, very likely to cause that thermal runaway, and it would be very, very difficult to extinguish. And of course, batteries can also leak into the environment, causing some long-term environmental impacts. So if any thought that a battery was suspect to saltwater flooding, we want to dispose of that properly. I believe for residents, they can call the county landfill has the household chemical collection site there next to the landfill, and they do take those batteries for you free of charge if you are a resident in Pinellas County. So just wanted to quickly cover before we got into substantial damage, some of the hazards post-storm that we look for as the fire department. And of course, if you have any inkling that there's a dangerous situation, we are available. 911 is your best resource to get us out there quickly, and we can look at a potentially hazardous situation and hopefully help you mitigate that before it becomes a true hazard. So thank you so much for your time, and look forward to your questions after this presentation.
Thank you, Chief. Change so that we're sharing the other screen. Okay. All right, so everybody can hear me, I'm assuming. So today it's myself, Terry Sullivan. I am the Community Improvement Director and Building Official for the City of South Pasadena. I'm also the Floodplain Manager, and Chief David Mixon is with us as well. He is also the Public Safety Director. So I'm going to go over some things about the National Flood Insurance Program and why we have to do the things that we have to do in order to make sure that we stay in compliance with the federal regulations. So the National Flood Insurance Program is managed by FEMA and aims to ensure that flood insurance is available and affordable to those who need it. Participating communities must operate within the appropriate FEMA guidelines in order to be eligible for funding and support. So some of the things that can happen if we do not follow the requirements is no residents will be able to purchase flood insurance. You will not be able to get any policies. Existing flood insurance policies would not be removed. No federal grants or loans for development may be made in identified flood hazard areas under the program, such as HUD, EPA, and the Small Business Administration. Those things, the entire city of South Pasadena is in a special flood hazard area. So none of those things would be available. No federal disaster assistance would be available to repair insured buildings located in identified flood hazard areas for damage caused by a flood. No federal mortgage insurance or loan guarantees may be provided in identified flood hazard areas, which would include FHA, VA, and there are many others. Federally insured or regulated lending institutions such as banks and credit unions must notify applicants seeking loans for insurable buildings in flood hazard areas that there is a flood hazard area and that the property is not eligible for federal disaster relief. So those are some of the things that can happen if we don't follow the regulations. So one of the requirements is that we do follow the regulations. We have signed documents to say that we would do that. And these are some of the things that could affect how you remodel, renovate, or add on to your building in order to better protect lives and property. So your home or business must be brought into compliance with the Florida Building Code and the City of South Pasadena floodplain ordinance if it is located in a mapped flood hazard area, not built to the current floodplain construction requirements, and it is substantially damaged or substantially improved. So usually this applies to remodeling or older structures, but it also affects structures that have sustained major damage. So if you go to remodel your home and you decide to do prior to storm, you decide to do more than 50% of the value of the structure, which is listed on the property appraiser's record. You can go into your property appraiser's website and look up your FEMA valuations. There's a letter that's right on their website that would show you that. And if you decided to do anything more than 50% of the value of just the structure, that doesn't include the land, it doesn't include any extra features, then you would have to bring it into compliance with the Florida Building Code as well as the floodplain ordinances. So damage assessment is something we've been working on. Damage assessment is performed immediately after an event to determine habitability, meaning whether or not the survivor can safely continue to live in the structure. So the damage to the homes and businesses are broken down into four categories. They're affected, minor, major, and destroyed. Base flood elevation is a word you're probably going to hear a lot of in the near future. So the base flood elevation is the elevation that has been set by the firm, the insurance rate maps. So those maps show an elevation for a base flood elevation. The city of South Pasadena has a 2-foot freeboard on top of that. So that would be the design flood elevation. The design flood elevation is where you're going to have to put, if you are in an A zone, it would have to be the top of the lowest floor. If you're in a B zone or a coastal A zone, it would be the bottom of the lowest horizontal member. So major damage for conventional structures, are considered to have major damage during a flood event if the residence has any of the following: a water line 18 inches above the floor in essential living space, a water line above the electrical outlets, or a water line on the first floor when a basement is completely full. So we don't have a whole lot of basements, but we have had some water lines above the electrical outlets. Major damage to a manufactured home are considered to have major damage during a flood event if water has come into contact with the floor system, including the belly board, insulation, ductwork, and subflooring. So these are FEMA guidance for conventionally built homes, and it tells you what we have to look at for all of the different categories. Would be for a flood event, there's one set of categories, and for a non-flood event, there's another. Gives you all the breakdown of affected, minor, major, and destroyed. The same guidance is for manufactured homes, and this gives the affected, minor, major, and destroyed, and how we need to look at that for manufactured homes. So substantial damage estimates are kind of the next step. And when structures inside the special flood hazard area are damaged, the National Flood Insurance Program participating communities like South Pasadena have a responsibility to assess impacts before repairs can be made, no matter the course of damage. So substantial damage is a NFIP defined term. The term applies to a damaged structure in a special flood hazard area or floodplain for which the total cost of repairs is 50% or more of the structure's market value before the disaster occurred. Land value is excluded from the determination. When damage meets the definition of substantial damage, communities must enforce requirements to bring those structures into compliance with floodplain management and Florida Building Code by meeting the regulations for new construction. As a participant in the NFIP, the City of South Pasadena is responsible for issuing substantial damage determinations and enforcing floodplain regulations to ensure federally backed flood insurance is made available for South Pasadena residents and property owners. We are in the process currently of doing the substantial damage estimates for the entire city. So components of compliance. The building and all electrical and mechanical equipment must be elevated above the 100-year flood elevation. Only parking, building access, and limited storage are allowed below the flood level. Phasing of improvements such as multiple or consecutive projects is not permitted, and the cost of all work is included in substantial improvement and substantial damage determinations. So a sample of the 50% rule. Now we took this directly from the property appraiser's website, chosen at random. This was a conventional structure, substantial damage determination. And the value of the structure is $162,728. The extra features are considered $22,587. So that could be sheds and pools and those kind of things. And the land value is $367,287. So for the same property, improvements or repairs to a storm damaged structure, for example, cannot exceed $81,364 without having to be brought into current code compliance based on the FEMA's 50% rule. So that's that 162,000 number divided by 50%. So the value of the structure for a manufactured home is not determined by real estate pricing. It is calculated using a combination of a set price per square foot with reduction for depreciation. So these are the NADA values. We have started to find that number. We are working through gathering all that information in order to make sure that we're using the most fair number for everyone. So permit requirements following a storm event. Permits are required prior to any demolition, that would be demolition of the entire structure, repair or replacement of the structure being performed. So prior to putting anything back, you can do the muck out and make sure you get all the water damage out. But before you put anything back, you have to have a permit and you have to have inspections on these things. So once you have received the substantial damage letter from the city, you may begin the process to replace the structure once the permit's issued. Use only licensed contractors for your protection. There's a lot of people out there who are trying to take advantage of your vulnerability right now. Licensed contractors kind of know the process and know what they need to do, and they follow more of the rules than somebody who's just coming in and trying to take care of things quickly for you. Any work that is done prior to the substantial damage estimate being completed is done without permits and may be required to be removed for inspection. In addition, you may be required to elevate the structure to meet the federal guidelines. So any work that you're doing to put things back right now is something that's not permitted, and it may have to come back out once we get the substantial damage estimates completed. So I wouldn't recommend doing any of that right now. So we're going to take some questions. If you have questions on your specific property, though, or we really can't answer the specifics. We are in the process of doing the damage assessment, and we will get those letters out to you hopefully in the next week or so, trying to get those done as quickly as we can. But we're going to take some questions. And so if anybody has any questions, please put them in the chat. We'll try and go through it that way, if that's okay. And I'm going to start the question portion. So, are you allowing residents to pursue private appraisals? We are. So you can get a private appraisal. There are some requirements from the federal government as to what that appraisal has to say. It has to be that its intended use is identified as something like to support a building permit application subject to significant improvement, significant damage determination under the National Flood Insurance Program regulations. And in the intended user has to be identified as the floodplain administrator as well as whoever else you want to use it. The next question is, how are those letters being provided? We will be mailing those out for the U.S. Postal Service. If you are not living in your structure right now, please have your mail forwarded through the U.S. Postal Service to wherever you are so that there's no setback as far as getting that letter to you. The substantial damage, next question was, what specifically will be included in the substantial damage letters issued by the city? It'll basically be a determination of how we feel the structure was damaged and the percentage. We're also going to include a copy of the property appraiser's record if that is available for your structure. Next question is, if we are told that we don't have substantial damage, will the permits be expedited? What amount of time do you think it will take to get the permit approved? So the expedition of permits is not something that we're thinking is going to be able to happen right now. The process is going to be that you have to submit a substantial damage form, which will be available on our website shortly. Once you submit that form, whether it's substantial damage or not, we'll have to process it that way. As soon as we can, we're going to take them in the order that they come in and process them as quickly as we can. Unfortunately, we have a very small staff. So we are trying to get additional assistance through the state. We have put in a request for that. And we'll get to it as soon as we possibly can. The next one is, why don't tell everyone you're valuing mobile homes at $7,000? That is not something that we were doing. We are valuing them based on the square footage, and we're working with the property appraiser as well as floodplain administrators to find a dollar amount based on the year it was built. Can you repeat the answer to the private appraiser for what is required? It sounds like you can't use an existing appraisal. So if you have an existing appraisal that was done in the last year, we should be able to use that. It does have to say that it is for significant improvement, significant damage determinations under the NFIP regulations. If it does not say that, we would not be able to use it under the federal regulations. Any update about considering a fair market value instead of NADA? So we've been given either the NADA or a cost per square foot as the acceptable uses. You can get a private appraisal if you choose to. That is your option. The land value is not something that is included with that per the federal guidelines. The substantial damage is based on the value of the structure only, no land included. The next question is, will the letter give an appeal process or do we have to file a lawsuit? There is an appeal process, and it will be included with that document. Do you pay for each permits? So the city of South Pasadena has not waived any fees for permits. So yes, there will be fees for permits. If the letter indicates we are less than the 50%, would any future changes or permit application cause that percentage to potentially adjust it up so they exceed the 50%? So the city of South Pasadena has a 1-year cumulative effect, and I'm assuming that's what we're talking about. So for acts of God, it is waived, and we do not do a look back per our floodplain ordinance. If you were to do some work today and within the year you are going to do additional work, that would be included in the 50%, and you may have to elevate the structure based on that. The 50% or the substantial damage worksheet that will have to be filled out with every permit application has to include all the work that you plan on doing. So phase construction is not an option. You have to include everything that needs to be done in order to make that habitable and back to what it was prior to the storm damage. How are you determining substantial damage? Are you having inspectors come out or just basing it on general knowledge of flooding in the area? So we're doing both. We've had inspectors out every day that we've been able to since Milton. We are going house by house and there is a substantial damage estimator that gives us calculations for everything that we have to put into the computer. We load it into the computer and then we put in the number from either the property appraiser or wherever we're getting that data from as to the value of the structure. And that goes into the computer and it does the calculation for us. We're also using our knowledge of the flooding in the area and the weather reports for this area as far as what the flooding was. We have all that data. During yesterday's webinar by Lakeshore Management, they stated that FEMA uses the property mobile home fair market pre-storm value to determine 50-50 values. Your info today contradicts that, which is correct. So I was not on the meeting from yesterday, so I'm not sure what we're talking about. It is a pre-storm value of the mobile home. So I'm not sure what the fair market value is. It's the value of the structure only, not the value of the structure on the land. So think of it as if you were to take your manufactured home and put it in any other city in the country, the value of the structure is the only thing that we're valuing. So it would be the value of that mobile home anywhere else in the world. So I hope that helps to answer your question. Is the substantial damage worksheet available on your website now? It is not. It is available in our office. I have not gotten it loaded up onto the website yet. It should be within the next day or two. But how do you know how much water was in the house versus outside? So we based all of our information on the water lines. We took pictures the day after the storm of all the water lines on every property in the city. And we're basing all of that on the water lines. So if the water was above your door to get into your house, we're pretty sure it got into your house. If you had, so we're basing our numbers off of that. If some people had flood panels put up and those flood panels kept the water out, you can give us proof of that. We can work with that. We're not saying this is the end all be all. This is a starting point. So next question is, sorry if I missed it. Can you please let us know when you expect to complete and mail all of the substantial damage letters? I'm expecting to have them completed by the end of the month. So about 5 or 6 days. And we should be getting them out in the mail shortly thereafter. I'm going to be getting them out as I get them completed. We're going to be producing letters. We're working through making sure our letters are correct and so that when we send them out to you, they're all good information. When are we getting the letter for you? I'm assuming that's a substantial damage letter. Again, it should be by the end of the month. Beginning of next month, should be getting them to you. Can you use your existing foundation to build up, building on top of the foundation to build a new structure, or is that considered an improvement? So if you were to take an existing, I'm assuming it's a concrete structure, and you wanted to use that as your new first floor or new ground floor and build the structure on top of it, that is a possibility. So you would have to have an engineer look at your existing structure, verify that it can support the additional weight that you're going to be putting on it with the new structure. In addition to that, you would have to use that only for parking, access, and storage, could not be used for any type of living space. You would have to add additional flood vent. You'd have to add flood vents so that the water can pass through that space and not create a dam. In addition, I mean, there's some other things that you would have to do, but that would have to be opened up so that the water can flow through it. And it would then be, your first floor would be above the design flood elevation. So hope that answered your question. If we received a substantial damage letter that indicates cost to repair will be less than 50%, and then we submit a permit application with the cost over the 50%, what will be used to determine if we need to come up to code? If the cost to repair is above the 50%, whether your substantial damage letter stated that it would be or not, you would have to bring your code into your home into compliance with the current code. There would be no question. Okay. I do not see any other questions. Oh, there we go. So just as an example, how high do you need to build for a house on South Pasadena Isle? I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but I can give you a general example. So in an A zone for the FEMA National Flood Insurance Program, you would have to, if say your base flood elevation for the land is 10 feet, you would have a 2-foot freeboard on top of that, which would put it at 12 feet. That 12 foot would be the top of your lowest floor. So in general, the grade over on the island is approximately 5 feet, and that's a ballpark number. So it would be 7 feet above the base, above grade, ballpark figures. If you are in a coastal A zone, which is the ones that are on the water, most of those are coastal A. So coastal A changes a little bit, and you now have to do it to the bottom, I'm sorry, the bottom of the lowest horizontal member. So if you had beams, it would be the bottom of the beam is where you would have to put that 12 foot. Again, those were ballpark numbers. When you say all work for substantial damage, is that just permitted work? No, that is all work to bring the property back to pre-storm damage. And then the next one is the cost of lifting the house. I cannot answer that question. That is, contractors would have to come and evaluate the house, and it is a specialty. So I'm not sure what their charges are. I missed the beginning of the meeting, so hope you are not repeating. A little bit, but that's okay. I don't mind. So the next question is, so like even painting and such. Yes, everything is part of that structure. It has to be included. I live in Causeway Village and Lakeshore. The owners are telling us that FEMA is saying that FMV should be used and not the NADA. Is this true, or will you definitely use the NADA in our park? So fair market value, I believe, includes the land. The federal regulations are for the structure only, not for the land. Are you hearing anything about special programs that might be made available through FEMA or other agencies to access funds for rebuilding to new FEMA compliant building standards? So I do know that they have something called an increased cost of compliance. And there is a value that they put on that. You would have to talk to the FEMA reps in order to get that information. Can you confirm that the 12 feet requirement is the top of the lowest floor and not the bottom of the lowest floor? If our elevation is 5 feet, then likely the top of our lowest floor is already above 12 feet. Again, can't speak to individual properties. If elevation of the grade is at 5 feet, most of the homes on the island are slab on grade, other than the ones that have previously been elevated. So you would have to, if you have an elevation certificate, that would be where you could get that information from. Elevation certificates are available on our website. If you click on the FEMA section of our website on the left-hand side, excuse me, we have any elevation that we have for any property in the city is listed there. So if you do have an elevation certificate and we have a copy of it, it should be listed there on our website. So if fair market value does not include land, then that is what would be used. It's the structure only. What about mobile homes at Causeway Village beyond repair? When and how to get a permit for demolition? You can submit the permit for demolition at this time if you choose to. We are receiving applications. Unfortunately, I can't process them until the substantial damage letters are done. As soon as they are done, we'll be issuing permits as quickly as we can. Are we still requiring inspection of open walls before drywall can be put up? Yes, we are. So once those walls are opened up, we have to verify that you're not enclosing something that would be a hazard. So a lot of times there's openings in there that are holes that would allow for, if there was a fire, the draft stopping, we have current draft stopping requirements. So once those walls are open, we need to verify that those things are taken care of and that your electrical is okay. So prior to putting up any drywall, we do need to do an inspection. And drywall is required to have a permit. So prior to doing drywall, you need to have that inspection. This says fair market is a value for mobile home only. Okay, and we can use that. The cost of current mortgage plus improvements will significantly increase our cost to live here. Are there any discussions to grandfather existing owners to existing values for tax purposes? The property appraiser addressed some of those things last night in a call with Linda Cheney, Representative Cheney. So the property appraiser stated that it's based on the square footage. So as long as you're not increasing the square footage, I believe the value should be about the same. That would be I believe it's on probably the property appraiser's website or Pinellas County's website. Back to Lakeshore, they stated FEMA will use FMV, i.e. real estate sales prices pre-storm, not NADA. That's the contradiction we are asking about. So real estate sales prices are very different than the value of the structure. So the sales price of your property is what it is in that particular park. That is not what the FEMA guidance says. The FEMA guidance says that it is the value of the structure only, which is why when we went to that example that I showed, the land value is completely removed from that. So that is the answer. When will open walls be inspected? That will be done after you receive a permit, and then you'd have to schedule an inspection. Okay. All right, so I don't see any other questions. I think we're gonna stop at this point. So if you'd like to send in questions or comments, please feel free. I've got our screen up showing our email addresses as well as phone numbers for the Community Improvement Department and the Public Safety Department. And we'll be happy to answer your questions. We can probably be a little more specific in those questions once we have an idea. There's some more questions. So back to the question of the property appraiser and new taxes, just as an example, if I have a 1.5K square foot house today and I build up to 2.5, will the increase be proportionate to the current value? So I believe the additional square footage would be the additional tax but that is a question for the property appraiser. Unfortunately, I don't do that. Does the open walls permit apply to mobile homes? Permits apply to everything. The mobile homes are in a little different because they are done by the Department of Motor Vehicles. So there will be some issues there. We'll have to figure out that basis. Permit has been requested. Okay, we'll get to it. As soon as we're done with the substantial damage estimates, we will send those out. Will all the letters be sent out at the same time? And that is, no, we will be sending them out in groups as we get them processed. All right. All right. Well, thank you for participating. And I hope we answered some of your questions, most of your questions. And if we can answer additional ones, we'll be happy to do so. Like I said, you can send an email or give us a call at one of those numbers. All right. Thank you. And I hope you all have a great day.
Thank you, everybody.